Once upon a time, you dressed so fine. You even threw the bums a dime in your prime, didn't you? People'd call, they'd say, "Beware, doll, you're bound to fall." You thought they were all kidding you. You used to laugh about everybody that was hanging out. Now you don't talk so loud. Now you don't seem so proud about having to be scrounging around for your next deal. So tell me, how does it feel? How does it feel to have to be out on your own with no direction home, a complete unknown, like a rolling stone? Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for literature this week. He didn't win the Nobel Prize for Scamming Idiots, at which he is the 20th century's best expert. Of all of the grand clowns, dictators who killed millions, and showmen who amused millions out of their money, billions out of their money, Dylan was the best at scamming idiots, at scamming idiots in such a way that they were proud to have been scammed. That particular song is an excellent example. It's Rolling Stone's greatest hit rock and roll song of all time. I agree with that evaluation, by the way. I think Like a Rolling Stone is the greatest rock and roll song of all time. But doing it as a dramatic reading the way I did it illustrates how little actual poetry there is in Bob Dylan. And that's one of the most viscerally personal songs that Bob Dylan ever wrote. Bob Dylan has no intention of showing you anything at all about the inner life of the man. But the idea of Bob Dylan being an artist is truly absurd. An artist in the sense of someone who, you know, in one way or another, tears his heart open in public so that you can see what's inside, so that you can see yourself inside there. You may see yourself in a lot of Bob Dylan songs, but you don't see Bob Dylan at all. He's not there. He's not there. I want to tell you about the way he looked, the way he acted, the color of his hair. It's all a pose. You're looking for Bob Dylan. He's not there. Bob's not here. But it was a really astounding turn of events. I'm sure astounding most of all to Bob Dylan himself, who has won the National Book Award, also debased that particular branch of literature. I'm not criticizing Dylan. I think Dylan is the most amazing pop artist to come out of the 20th century. And again, we're talking about a century that was full of really, truly amazingly, insanely, outrageously affective, not effective, but affective pop artists. Dylan was the best. And his legacy continues to this very day, and we'll get to that. But there is nothing of literature in the man. I mean, nothing of literature in the man. Like a Rolling Stone is a cowardly breakup letter performed in public as rock and roll. He's breaking up with Edie Sedgwick in public. He is arguably setting in motion the chain of events that led to her death. She's your lover now. He went back to hit her a second time. She's your lover now. He beat the shit out of that woman in public, and she died in the Chelsea Hotel. If you want to see Dylan attempting to be a poet, go to the library. Do not pay money for this. Go to the library and pick up Tarantula. This is Dylan's one book of poetry that I know of, and oh my God, it is awful. If you watched the Johan episode of Blackish this week, the poser poet who says insanely, stupidly, banal, nonsensical word salad with a profound and solemn performance. This is Dylan in Tarantula. He was completely out of his depth, and he knew it, and he just pounded it out to get it out of the way. It was nothing but phoning it in. And Ronaldo and Clara, the terrible movie that Dylan made in the 70s, I mean, really awful. I would think that Bob Dylan should take his Nobel Prize money and invest in a get-out-of-hell free card. That he should invent a get-out-of-hell free card that is to be presented to anyone who can sit through the entire film of Ronaldo and Clara. It's on the order of 4 hours long. Sit through the entire film without falling asleep or wincing. If you can do that, you get out of hell free. The Latter-day contributions of Bob Dylan are substantially more audience appealing, more mainstream, more middle of the road, and more musical for what that's worth. And the man is a great pop artist. And the thing that made him a great pop artist was combining the postmodern sensibilities of the college-bred crowd with rock and roll, with popular music, with 145, very simple classic American music. I make jokes that anyone suing for royalties for music should have to prove that the song isn't 75% or more Pachelbel's canon, because all of American popular music is at least 75% Pachelbel's canon. Quite a bit of it is 100% Pachelbel's canon. The 12-bar blues, which I've talked about before, is devolved from 145, which is in turn devolved from Pachelbel's canon, which is written in 145. Dylan's great contribution to music theory consists of switching to 154, which you find in Knocking on Heaven's Door. I talked about it with Wagon Wheel, Blown in the Wind, The Times They Are a Change, and 154, big innovation. That's Dylan music as music theory, and undoubtedly he stole that too, that 154 was coming out of Scottish reels and things like that. You can hear it. Irish music, hill music, American folk music, and Dylan, in his youth, was a catalog of American folk music. He could play anything badly. He's not a great guitar player, he never was, but he could play all of this music and sing it and really understand it, really understand the poetry behind it. And this is the greatness of Bob Dylan as a pop artist, is as a catalog of Americana even, but American folk music history, American country music history, American hill music, gospel music. Tom Waits is the other one who fits into this category of cataloging a whole bunch of classic American music and keeping it alive. And that's what Dylan did. Dylan is the greatest thief among the pop artists of the 20th century. I can't think of anything that's truly original in Dylan. I can't think of anything that you can't figure out where he stole it from. And in many cases, he's stealing all from one source, so it makes it real easy. Jack London has a copyright infringement suit to bring against Bob Dylan, and more than one. But he mixes and matches beautifully, and even when he's writing word salad, I read an article in the Los Angeles Times rhapsodizing Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. I invite you to go read those lyrics, or read them the way I read the first verse of Like a Rolling Stone. Read them as if it were text, as if it were the script of a play. Turn it into dialogue. I think this is a good idea anyway. This is a great way to understand the poetry in pop music, is to turn it into dialogue and read it that way. But do that with Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands and try to figure out what the hell is going on. This is word salad. This is... Bob Dylan had been infected by Andy Warhol, who convinced him that pigs would eat anything. And he had tremendous productivity pressures in all directions. The guy got more popular, and every time he got more popular, he got busier. Every time he got busier, he got more popular. He was really, really huge. At the time that he wrote Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, the time that he wrote Like a Rolling Stone, and he says later in the song Sarah, staying up for days at the Chelsea Hotel, writing Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands for you. Well, number one, I don't believe Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands is about Sarah Lowndes. I think it's probably about Joan Baez. I really don't know. It might be about Suze Rotolo. It might be about C.D. Edric, or it might just be fiction. It might just be a fictional woman that he's writing about in order to hammer out an 11-minute song to fill out a double album, because he was overcommitted. He needed to produce twice as much material as he had. And so he hammered out 11 minutes of word salad with a really catchy chorus. And if you read that word salad, it makes no sense. There is no way to parse that as poetry. This is not magical, mystical symbolism like Rimbaud, who Dylan constantly name checks. No, this is word salad. This is a speed freak, an amphetamine addict, at the tail end of his addiction, just before he hits rock bottom. Staying up for days. Bob, how do you stay up for days at the Chelsea Hotel? By making frequent calls to Mr. Tambourine Man, who drops by with a handful of rain, tempting you to defy it. It's all there. Bob Dylan is writing about his amphetamine addiction all through this period. It's all in that music. It's all right there. If you're looking for symbolism in Bob Dylan, you're looking for symbolism about about amphetamine, not methamphetamine. About amphetamines. With her fog, her amphetamines, and her pearls. Good grief. The man is telling you the truth about his life, and you won't listen to him. You're constantly going through his garbage trying to find out which Book of the Month club he canceled his membership to. Unbelievable. But it's just sad. I mean, it's really sad. It's sad for Dylan. It's sad for the idea of literature, for the idea of art. It's definitely sad for all of the dumbass baby boomers who are so emotionally weak that they have to be pandered to in their old age. They have to be told that they are connoisseurs of great art because they listen to this amazingly successful minstrel who stole every song you ever heard. Stole it, filed off the serial numbers, recast it, pushed it out there as his own, and if anybody said boo, he just buffaloed and he just bowled right through it. Listen to Girl from the North Country, listen to Scarborough Fair, and then listen to the Simon and Garfunkel version of Scarborough Fair and find out how you really steal a song and make it better rather than just stealing it in order to have a structure to hang a meaningless lyric on. There is no girl from the North Country, blah, blah, blah. This is Bob Dylan pandering to his audience. And as I said at the outset, Bob Dylan has been an expert all his life at scamming idiots. He took great delight in the same period from, say 63 to 66, from Carnegie Hall or even Town Hall through the motorcycle accident. Every time that Bob Dylan is talking to the press, to the mainstream media, he is scamming them, and he is having enormous fun at it. He's having great, great fun at it. You're seeing probably a DS when he was a kid. He turns into an ID because of all this fame and notoriety. The incandescence really runs through him, probably because of the amphetamine. And he becomes a really vicious, mean, cruel, vindictive, but also very comical enfant terrible. He was the enfant terrible of the 60s. And why did the kids like him? Because he's licensing their own bad behavior. But Like a Rolling Stone is a perfect example. I mean, publicly breaking up with Edie Sedgwick in such an amazingly excoriating way. Go and read those lyrics in that context. You're reading a public breakup of someone. He came back to New York married to Sarah Lowndes. She had no idea. She thought that she was going to marry Bob Dylan, and he came back married. She had no idea that he was even involved with Sarah Lowndes. And here comes Like a Rolling Stone to put her entire private life on public display. All of her laundry, all of her dirty laundry hanging out on the line so everyone could see it. That was vicious, cruel, I mean, really unbelievably vile behavior on the part of Bob Dylan. This is the greatest rock and roll song ever written. Truly is. And resonates with a lot of people because they like that idea of having that kind of final vindication, getting that, time wounds all heals, at last you get yours, no. This is really vicious and ugly. And again, it's dump worship. Like Rolling Stone is dump worship. All he's doing is looking behind him and saying, gee, I'm so glad I scraped that shit off my shoe. Well, it's a song about shit then. That's what it is. It's a song about shit. And if you're looking for Bob Dylan's artistic contribution at the time, look for that kind of shitty behavior everywhere because that's what he was doing. He was behaving like an asshole and writing about it. And then he hit the tree with his motorcycle, and the band was living in West Saugerties and Big Pink, and they made the Basement Tapes, and the band made music from Big Pink, and the band ultimately made the Brown Album. If you take that same period, not in Dylan's career, but in the band's career, take the band from Tony Martz through meeting Dylan, Forest Hills, the American tour, the Australian tour, the European tour. The European tour is, I think it's number 6 in the bootleg series, the Royal Albert Hall concert, which really isn't at Royal Albert Hall. But that's a wonderful show. If you want to find Dylan at the absolute height of his assholiness best, it's that particular show. That's why it was such a successful bootleg for all those years, and why CBS has made so much money selling it as a bootleg since they released it. But follow the band through Australia, through the European tour, through England, back to the US, back to into Big Pink and making the Basement Tapes, making music from Big Pink, and make a movie out of that. The Band. Robbie Robertson, C.I., Levon Helm, S.I., no real D in the band, no real D, which is why they were a bar band. And here comes Mr. ID Rockstar to sweep them off their feet, pull them out of Tony Martz, and put them on stage, on a big, big stage at Forest Hills, and then even bigger stages everywhere they went. Brings them back to New York and warehouses them because he had nothing for them to do. I think he was probably paying them, still paying them when they were in Big Pink. But he's coming over every day and finding an elevation with the boys about 4:20 in the afternoon and making music until midnight or 2 a.m. every day and putting it all on tape. And this turned into the Basement Tapes and led to music from Big Pink, which is one of the greatest rock and roll albums ever produced. This would make a wonderful movie. And this is, again, if you're looking to establish Dylan as an artistic influence, forget literature. There is no literature in Dylan. There is no literature in pop music. But if you're looking to establish Dylan as an artistic influence, it stops right there. Dylan's influence on music in general started and stopped with the band. I was thinking earlier that if Levon Helm had not quit the band when Dylan horned his way in, Levon Helm had been in charge, Dylan took over. This is exactly like the family drama where mom takes over or a kid takes over. Dylan shows up and takes over the family that was the band, and Levon Helm was so put out that he essentially divorced himself, went back to Louisiana, worked on an oil rig during this whole time that they were touring the world with Bob Dylan. Mickey Jones was playing the drums. But had Levon Helm been along on that show, on that tour, it might have been a completely different tour, and it might have been a completely different Dylan. It might have been a completely different Dylan from then on. That Dylan had Robbie Robertson there to emphasize all of this C-I stuff that Dylan really lacked. Dylan has never shown anything like C sensibilities. He's really D. He was DI, DS when he was a kid, maybe ID when he was popular, and he graduated and became DI, and he's DI to this very day. He is a very, very driven man, very hard worker, very hard worker. But he had Robbie Robertson to tickle his intellectual vanity, and he didn't have Levon Helm around to teach him how to have 3 drinks but not 5. To teach him how to find an elevation where you're funny and mellow and you can tell a joke and still get one, and not be a walking zombie, not be asleep with your eyes open, and unable to sleep with your eyes wide open, which is the way Dylan was at that time, all of that time. Why Dylan was so crazy and why he was so productive and why the productivity is so mercurial and why it didn't last, why it had to end, why the motorcycle crash may have been real or it may have been fake, but the crash in the man himself was real. He had to crash. Valium would have fixed that fast. Lou Reed said that. I'm talking about all this because I know about it. I have no direct firsthand experience with that level of pharmacochemical intervention, but Dylan definitely did. And in recovering from that, he became a softer, mellower guy, but he also became more and more of the hidden minstrel that when he was with Suze Rotolo, he was kind of open and visceral. There was at least some few hints of the man amidst all of the costumery. Through Joan Baez, there's some. Through Edie Sedgwick, there's a lot. And after that, there's really none. We go to West Socrates and we make all kinds of beautiful old-timey music, and none of it tells us anything at all about Bob Dylan, or if it does, it's so obscure you can't tell what's what and what's just bullshit. But at least the word salad was gone. He went to Nashville with a totally fake persona, made those John Wesley Hardin, Nashville Skyline self-portrait. Oh my God, how awful. And this man is lost. He is lost. He hit that tree. He had the band. He sent the band off to L.A., and Dylan is lost and has no way of finding his way back. And it took him a long way to claw his way back, and he did. And in so doing, he resurrected the career of the band with Planet Waves and the Before the Flood tour. But then, Bob Dylan was born again, converted to Christianity, and everyone dropped him. The entire Pomo world, the entire leftist Marxist world that he had subsisted on this entire time. Pete Seeger hated it that Dylan wasn't the committed Marxist that he liked to pretend to be, but Dylan loved to get pretend committed Marxists to pretend that listening to Dylan was a way of expressing their Marxism. He got Marxists to pay him, make him very, very rich, thinking they were doing something against the greedy capitalists and in behalf of the proletariat. It was a really brilliant scam on Dylan's part. I mean, his whole career is a scam. His whole career is based on this idea that a very conservative, very money-aware, elderly Jewish man, very much in control of his investments, and a very hardworking guy who's constantly making more money, that man is in some sense a descendant of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and all of these communists, Marxists associated with the music movement in the 40s and 50s. Dylan was never that. He was never that. He was riding one train until he could hop another, and that's all he is. He's America's musical hobo, and God bless him, he's been everywhere, and he's heard everything, and he brought it all back. And it's good. It's really good. But it's not literature. It's not art. It will not be important 30 years from now. Remember, 30 years ago, Dylan was born again in nowhere. Everyone hated him. He couldn't get airtime anywhere except on gospel stations. Not even the oldie stations were playing Dylan at the time. Everybody hated him. He was untouchable. And now all of a sudden he's irreproachable. Now you see the relationship between those two roles. He went from untouchable to irreproachable in 30 years. Will he be untouchable again 30 years from now? And will anyone remember him 300 years from now? I'd bet against it. But still, how does it feel, Bob? To be a 15 amp fuse with 60 amps of current flowing through you, to be accused of being something you never were and never wanted to be, and to be held up to a standard you can never live up to, as Tarantula demonstrates, and to be complicit, if not responsible, in the destruction of the idea of greatness in art. By giving the Nobel Prize for Literature to Bob Dylan, the Nobel Committee has said we are as serious about literature as the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was about peace when it gave the Peace Prize to Barack Obama for having held an affirmative action job for 8 days. This is the destruction of everything that matters in Western civilization, this ideal of greatness that we all should aspire to. This is the destruction of that ideal by means of cheapening it, turning it into a counterfeit reward. Bob Dylan did great things in his life. One may hope he will continue to do great things. But none of those things will ever matter in the way that Homer matters, in the way that Shakespeare matters, in the way that Aeschylus matters. And to say that he does matter in that way is simply to say that I am too emotionally insecure to embrace good art, and therefore I have to take crap art and pretend it's good. It's not about Dylan, it's about the audience. It's always been about the audience. Dylan understands that. It's always been about the audience. And he's always kept the audience reaching for him by snubbing them mercilessly, by refusing to take them seriously. And for his sake, I hope he does the same thing with his Nobel Prize. I hope he cashes the check, puts the statue on the mantle, and never thinks about it again, because what he did is wonderful, and what he will never do is practically infinite. And to be able to accept yourself the way you are, accept what you can do and have done, and to understand what you may never do, even if you do keep striving, and do keep striving, Bob. Keep working at it, man. Wagon Wheel, you chucked it in the trash, and here it is, a huge hit for 2 different acts. To Make Me Feel My Love, Garth Brooks and Adele both turn it into a huge, huge hit. The man is brilliant. He is a brilliant songwriter. And I'll put him right there in the same company as Gershwin. It's really good pop art, but that's all it is. And to say that it's more is to cheapen the idea of greatness, to sully what Bob Dylan actually did do by pretending that he did all kinds of things that he didn't do, and to indulge ourselves in the worst kind of cotton candy wishful thinking, to insist that by consuming art that is slightly more important than the machinations of Kim Kardashian, to pursue that art somehow makes us great arbiters of taste and students of the sublime. There's nothing of the sublime in Bob Dylan. He never wanted it there. Let the man be what he is. Celebrate what he is. Dance to it. But don't pretend he's Homer, and don't pretend that Shakespeare is him. This is the Church of Splendor. My name is Greg Swan. I'm so glad I got to talk to you today. We'll talk again next week.